What's up, everyone? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm the Crockneck, and I am back with some underrated albums. And decided to go into some heavy metal slash trad metal. I want to kind of get down to the classic stuff. And yeah, I wanted to do this one because this was kind of an interesting one because there's a lot of 80s stuff I could bring in, and there's a fair amount of like more modern stuff that kind of harks back to that sound that I could bring in, which I thought was kind of fun. And honestly, when it came down to like comparing them, there isn't much of a difference. So I like the fact that this is still a fiercely retro sound and it's still really good. And this is kind of an interesting style because you can kind of take from a lot of eras. It can go all the way back to like the late 70s and sort of the proto sound of that, like, you know, Thin Lizzy, and you can go all the way to like, you know, the mid to late 80s where that sound got a little bit more polished and a little bit like kind of proto power metal too. So this was kind of a fun one to do just because I think there was a lot to talk about within this genre, and I found some stuff that is kind of all over the place just in terms of the style. So let's just get into this. Oz, Fire in the Brain, which I think is the opposite of Water on the Knee. Anyway, this is the second album from this Swedish heavy metal act that ran from 77 to 91 and then broke up, then reformed in 2010 and still currently going. This is, again, classic heavy metal, came out in 1983, I believe, and it has a bit of an occult vibe, and honestly the thing I like about it is it's a little bit more raw and dirty sounding. The guitars have a bit of like a crackle or a sizzle to them, and the vocals definitely remind me a lot of Paul Di'Anno, though I think they're kind of back in the mix, but honestly what carries this is the riffs. The riffs on here are absolutely killer. Really interesting melodies. I think the song Megalomaniac almost opens like Van Halen's Eruption. Like, it's just this long, lavish, squealy lead, and then we're into just some almost kind of sleazy Motorhead sort of riffs. And I kind of like that they kind of balance out that whole, let's get the nice big Iron Maiden sort of melodies in there, but let's also get a little bit dirty and gritty. There are a lot of good tracks on here though. Black Candles almost has a Blue Oyster Cult vibe. Like, even the vocals kind of remind me a bit of Eric Bloom. A little bit goofy, but a whole lot of fun. Love the riff work. And again, that sort of raw, kind of cheesy, like early 80s, like occult vibe. Like, ooh, this is 80s scary. Like, you know, it get much scarier later on, but you know, the parents that were probably freaking out about, you know, Kiss were probably really not in love with stuff like this. But yeah, really, really solid stuff. Recommend checking this album out. I need to get more of their stuff, like namely their debut. But yeah, good classic heavy metal. Check it out. Thunderlip The Prophecy. This came out in 2007. This is the second album from this North Carolina act. And this is heavy metal meets stoner metal. So kind of like Spirit Adrift, except before Spirit Adrift was around. This album really captures, again, that kind of sound, you know, before heavy metal became like kind of a big thing. So late 70s, early 80s. And it really just kind of hangs on close to like, you know, Thin Lizzy, I would definitely say Deep Purple, but also early Iron Maiden and early Saxon. While the vocals don't really have that classic 80s heavy metal vibe, they kind of do have more of that 70s rock vibe. And honestly, the production is definitely a little bit closer to stoner metal. It kind of has that fuzzy warmth to it. But they really kind of capture that blend really well because, I mean, you still get the big stoner rock riffs, but you get a lot of like the heavy metal harmonies and such. I especially love the song Backseat Bedlam, which, yeah, there's a little bit of a, like, sort of, you know, 70s, 80s sleaze to it. Denim Destiny, I mean, these are hilarious song titles. Rock Lady. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure they love Kiss too. It just kind of sounds like it. And honestly, they do a really, really killer cover of Highway Star in here as a bonus track, but really solid stuff. I don't know really what happened to this band. I think they're still around, but this is the only album I ever picked up by them, and I really dig it. I come back to it fairly often. And again, it kind of shows that cool blend of, again, that sort of window in time where heavy metal was still kind of becoming a thing. But again, this came out in 2007. So yeah, definitely check this out, especially if you're a fan of like stuff like Spirit Adrift. It kind of fits right in with that sound. And yeah, I need to get some more of it just because remembered how much I like this. So yeah, good stuff here. Check it out. Satan, Court in the Act. It's the 1983 debut from this UK heavy metal act, and honestly, this is a truly underrated, underappreciated new album, new wave of British heavy metal album in general. I just had to throw it on here. I think this one is maybe a little bit more well known, especially for fans of that particular subgenre, but this is quite a classic. The music on here is absolutely fantastic. Like, this almost kind of rivals Killers in a way. Not quite though. I mean, Killers is just fucking badass from start to finish, but this is pretty damn close to that. I love the vocals on here. The guitar harmonies are great, and honestly, it feels a little bit heavier than like a lot of the new wave of British heavy metal that was actually coming out. Like, the guitars feel just a little bit thrashier. Great high energy songs, loads of catchy hooks. Like, this is just hook city. This is pretty much honestly everything I want out of classic heavy metal, like in terms of a retro sound or in terms of like an old school sound. This is pretty much it. But yeah, this band has an interesting history. They changed their name to Blind Fury, not the Rutger Hauer movie, but the band, which I never actually picked up anything under that label. I picked up only the Satan albums because you got the name right the first time. I think they changed it to Pariah later on, but they came back to Satan, and they are back. They have released, I believe, 2 really awesome albums that are still pretty much on par with this. This still being the best one of the bunch, in my opinion, but the new albums have been really good. Strongly recommend this one. If you've never heard it, this is like a legit classic in my mind. We're right up there again with Killers, I would even say Angel Witch. It's just a fantastic album, and it's just loaded with everything that most people just love about heavy metal. So yeah, check this one out. Black Trip, Going Under. It's the debut album from this Swedish band. It came out in 2013, and this actually featured ex-members of Dismember, Entombed, Regurgitate, Enforcer, and current Tribulation guitarist Joseph Thull, who actually does vocals on here. This was a straight-up classic heavy metal sort of retro project that these guys got together, and holy shit, did they really just capture the feel. Right down to the production, it has this very classic sounding, like, you know, Killers era Iron Maiden production. Very warm analog sound, hooks aplenty. The vocals on here are a little bit, again, more like the Paul Di'Anno style, but this is pretty much carried by just great riff work, great hooks on here. Like, literally every song just feels catchy as hell, and they have a lot of fun with the guitar work. And honestly, some of the stuff kind of reminds me of stuff The Sword did, especially the song The Bells, which has just their kind of like, you know, bluesy sort of boogie to it. And the title track is absolutely loaded with gorgeous guitar harmonies and honestly a little bit danceable. I kind of wanted to shake my ass a bit to it. I think the detail to production was kind of a big thing in here, because even the lead guitar tones kind of sound like those early Maiden lead guitar tones. So Adrian Smith and Dave Murray sort of bouncing back and forth, and of course working together to create beautiful melodies. But yeah, this pretty much hits every little check mark I look for in like classic heavy metal. Now, this band only put out, I believe, 1 other full length under this name, because technically they're still around. They're just called Vojd, V-O-J-D, however you say that, Vojd? I don't know. I don't speak Swedish or any other language. But that change happened around 2016, and I guess I need to pick up some of their stuff. I mean, if it's anything like this, then I'm totally down. I have kind of just forgotten about this one until I jammed this recently. I was like, dude, this is just really, really good. So yeah, if you love classic heavy metal, except, you know, stuff that came out in 2013, check this out. It's absolutely awesome. Dead Child, Attack. This is the lone full length from this Louisville band. And honestly, this is something I thought about bringing up for a retro review at some point, but this is a pretty unknown band. In fact, all the members of this band were in non-metal projects, and they just kind of decided they wanted to do a metal project. A lot of punk and hardcore bands, indie bands, but nothing really metal, honestly. And I think that kind of made this a little bit different, because listening to this, first off, you notice the guitar tone is quite a bit heavier for this style of metal. Generally in classic heavy metal, the guitar tone isn't super heavy, but it was heavy for the time. This is heavy for now. Like, it's actually more comparable to bands like The Sword or Mastodon. It's kind of sludgy and kind of chunky. And in terms of their songwriting and approach, it is a little bit different. They don't do a tremendous amount of harmonies, but this is very breakdown heavy. But at the same time, it's still very much heavy metal. Like, it has all the gallops, it has the very distinctly heavy metal kind of riffs. It just kind of skimps on the harmonies a bit. and it likes a lot of syncopated chugs and, again, breakdowns. Like, a lot of them for a heavy metal album is kind of odd. And vocally, it's kind of different, too. It's a little atypical because the vocalist sounds like Jello fronting a heavy metal act, which, I mean, he's done some heavier projects, but this is definitely like a classic heavy metal sound, but with a kind of Jello-ish vocalist covering it. So, yeah, a little different. But honestly, all of this is really good. It all really works well together. The riffs are more simplified, but I mean, they write some killer songs, especially Eye to the Brain. I really dig that. And the really interesting hook that pretty much carries Wasp Riot. It's just a strange song, but I don't know, like it just has this steady, straightforward sort of stomp and this really cool syncopated riff to it. And again, when I compared it to a lot of the other stuff that I have in this list, it's just kind of unique in terms of its approach, which made me want to bring it up. This band broke up not too long after this release. Unfortunately, their drummer died. I'm not entirely sure how, but he seemed pretty young, and that sucks, and that can definitely make you not want to continue on with the project. But I really dig this album, and I haven't listened to this one in years and kind of came back to it with fresh ears over the years. God, that's too much rhyming there. Anyway, it really struck a chord with me. Like, I think this is just a really cool, unique approach to classic heavy metal, and it has just unique hooks, like the kind of hooks you don't hear in a lot of different heavy metal acts. And the fact that it is so different and well executed really makes this stand out. And again, one day, somewhere further down the road, I'd like to do a retro review on this one just because it is such an interesting album. But for now, I'm going to bring it up here, and I will recommend you check it out. And I would say this is probably the most different one on the entire list here, but definitely worth your time. Check it out. High Power, which is what Shred runs on. This is their self-titled debut, came out in 1983, and this is a French act, and all of this is in French, so get ready for the usual foreign pronunciation struggle here. This is another one I considered for a retro review because they only had 2 albums before breaking up in 1987. And this one, instead of kind of going more after, I would say, like the Iron Maiden sound, this one kind of locked on to more Judas Priest. The tone of the guitars especially reminds me of Judas Priest. It's kind of got like a nice kind of crunchy tone to it, but it just kind of feels like a Judas Priest kind of tone. And honestly, that is not a bad thing at all. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of the vocals on here. They can get a little, I don't know, kind of over the top, but not like the way I like. And the fact that the lyrics are all in French and they're all sung in French in terms of his delivery, it just kind of adds another layer of camp to it. But I really don't have any complaints about the music. The music is straight up classic heavy metal. Now, this actually has 2 songs over 8 minutes on here, and they're pretty well written, especially Offrande Charnel? Sure, we'll call it that. Lots of dynamics. It really, just kind of takes you on an interesting journey. Lots of great melodies, really cool, clean guitar parts. And honestly, the vocals are a little bit better on that one. And then the song All Cool, like A-L-C-O-O-L, all cool. All right. It's a cool track. And it also kind of sounds like the Looks the Kill riff, which that's a solid riff. I love that riff. And if it's reminding me of that, that's pretty damn cool. And honestly, this gets kind of like in that proto-thrash realm. Like listening to this, I could hear like stuff that would be later more popularized on, like Show No Mercy and Kill 'Em All. The song, Cauchemar, I don't know. Cauchemar, whatever or however you say that. I am sorry to the entire French-speaking community of our YouTube channel. I'm killing it here, huh? Anyway, really strong stuff. I would like to check out their second album eventually and maybe do a retro review of this because this is a pretty solid album. Very interesting album cover, and I guess the frontman did wear leopard spotted, jaguar spotted stuff on stage, so I guess there was a theme. I don't know. Either way, solid album. I'd like to check out more by them and eventually do like a retro review on it just because we'd like to cover some classic heavy metal bands as well. But yeah, definitely check it out. In Solitude. It's their self-titled debut from 2009. This is the debut album from this defunct Swedish heavy metal act. They only put out 3 albums before, eventually just breaking up. And holy shit, this stuff is amazing. I have all 3 albums and I was trying to think of which one to bring up, but this debut really kind of got me back into the whole trad, like classic heavy metal sound when it came out, because these guys do it right. It's heavy, it's dark, and it has this sort of occult gothic sort of feel, and kind of interesting in terms of like the bands that this band came from. They had former members of Undergang and Ghost. That one. One or two of these guys were actually one of the original Nameless Ghouls before Tobias started firing people and bringing in more hired guns. And I can see why he poached them, because these guys have a great gift for melody. And again, this is kind of interesting because it's somber. It's almost like if Sisters of Mercy was a heavy metal band, because you have that kind of almost kind of gothic undertone, but it's very epic. And wow, dude, the melodies in here are so catchy. Every single song in here is catchy, and they get legit heavy, especially the song Cathedral with a K. That song absolutely rips. The production here is a little bit more on the modern side, but it actually still works well. You don't lose any of that sort of classic feel. And vocally, excellent. The clean vocals are fantastic. He has a really good range, and they do pepper in some harsh vocals every now and then for some extra added heaviness, as if this really needed it. Absolutely killer release. I recommend all three of their albums. And again, this is another one I want to do a retro review on, because these guys capture that classic heavy metal sound so damn well, and I really, really wish they were still around, like doing tours with Portrait or something like that, because that would be a sweet lineup, and I have no idea which one's going to headline. Maybe you have to do an alternating thing, but this one has to come back first. Again, killer release, but all their albums are killer. I recommend all of them. But yeah, check this one out. It absolutely kills. And again, check out all their other stuff too. This band I really wish was still around, but oh well. Check it out though. Christian Mistress, Possession. This is their second album, came out in 2012, and this is another defunct band. They were from Washington and Oregon, and again, this is another different approach to classic heavy metal in terms of the bands that I think they were kind of after, because this one has, again, a little bit more of that earlier sound, like late 70s, early 80s. The production, and mainly the guitar tone, I think is very fuzzy, and it kind of has a little bit of that stoner metal sound, and really bluesy. And you add their awesome female vocalist, who has like a very interesting delivery and really cool cadences on here. You have a sound that kind of reminded me a lot of like Rainbow and Dio era Sabbath, or just Dio in general. I mean, you add in the fact that this actually has almost kind of a raw, like demo-ish feel, like it doesn't feel very compressed, it feels very like jammed in the studio. And the fact that I think the drum work sounds a lot like Bill Ward, this really kind of hit me hard in like the old school retro feels, because this really clinged on to some awesome sounds, and it didn't necessarily sound like a lot of this other stuff too. And much like Sabbath, this actually gets a little bit doomy. The song Black and Gold and the title track are almost kind of like early Candlemass-ish. And the guitar work in here, they love a lot of cool acoustic passages, which I think is really cool. It breaks up a lot of the really cool riffs, which melodies, harmonies left and right on here. Very, very hook laden. And the cool lead trade-offs on Haunted are exceptional. I have this band's first album too, which I think is also really awesome. I'm just missing the third one, but this is another one I kind of wanted to bring up for a retro review, because they broke up way too soon, and I think they were really on to something with, especially this release. You know, they kind of captured that whole retro feel, but they brought in some different elements to just kind of keep it from sounding like all the other trad metal bands that were coming out at the time. Great album. Strongly recommend checking out all their stuff. Their first album is really good. I know that for a fact. Still gotta check out that third one. But yeah, check this one out. Really good stuff, and eventually we'll cover them in greater detail. But for now, check this one out. Chastain, Ruler of the Wasteland. This is the second album from this Cincinnati-based band. Came out in 1986, and this was essentially assembled for David T. Chastain, who the band is named after. Mike Varney, the head of Shrapnel Records, which was a big shred label, like Cacophony was on there, Marty Friedman, and he wanted to assemble a band for David to play with so he can tour on it, and he got him some solid players, namely the vocalist on here, Leon Leather. I think that's her name. It just says Leather as vocals on here, but I think her name is Leon. And holy shit, did he poach a killer vocalist. She fucking rules on here. she has this great raspy delivery, and it's just powerful as hell. Like, he found a female Rob Halford, and she owns on this entire album. But naturally, so does David, and since this was kind of built with shred in mind, this is almost kind of a virtuoso sort of album, but also classic heavy metal. And coming out in 1986, production had changed a little bit. This has a little bit more of that late 80s production where the guitars are a little bit chunkier, and this was kind of at that point where it was bordering a little bit on power metal, but I didn't think it was too cheesy. I mean, it is a little bit cheesy, because, I mean, I don't really think that dude's the ruler of the Wasteland. It's got to be someone else, probably wearing a mask, and works out more at least. But I dig this because it's very guitar driven, and the production, I mean, I think they listened to Painkiller once or 300 or 800 times, and it's like, yeah, I kind of want that. My only complaint though is the songs, in terms of how they're structured, it kind of feels like some of it should be instrumental, but I wouldn't want to remove Leon's vocals on any of these tracks, even though sometimes they don't necessarily fit, because it sounds like a lot of this was built to shred over. And I totally get it. It's packed to the brim full of solos and leads. But I don't know, it was kind of a weird thing that I noticed on here. It just, some songs just felt like they weren't written with vocals in mind. Now, this band is still around, I guess, and actually reformed, because I believe not long after this album, Leon left, and then she was replaced with a different singer. Then I think they kind of just broke up in general, and then reformed fairly recently. I want to say 2016, and Leon is back in the band, and I guess she can still fucking wail like she did on here. I have yet to check out any of the reunion stuff, but yeah, surprisingly, I really dig this, and like the power metal vibe is really not my vibe. I think most people get that by now, but I really enjoyed this, and I picked this up forever ago just because I heard of this dude, like in terms of his playing ability, and you know, he's from my state, so I thought that was kind of cool. But yeah, this was kind of a legit surprise and a little bit outside of my wheelhouse, but I strongly recommend this. This is a solid album, and if you love shreddy lead work and fucking killer female vocals on classic heavy metal, check this shit out. It's a pretty solid album. And finally, we have Tank, Filth, Hounds of Hades. This is their 1982 debut. This was a UK band that kind of came up in the whole new wave of British heavy metal, and these guys brought the fun. And it's kind of like a Motorhead sort of feel throughout this entire album, except with different vocals. Arguably a little bit more tuneful than Lemmy, but Lemmy's fucking Lemmy. He's, well, God. So, yeah. But these guys really capture that vibe of like sleazy fun and big rock riffs that were a little bit bluesy, but they kind of beefed them up, and it kind of became metal from there. And much like Motorhead, I can really see how this influenced thrash metal. There's a lot of really cool thrashy hooks on here in terms of like the early thrash, again, like Kill 'Em All, Show No Mercy, that sort of stuff. But these guys didn't skimp on melody either. The song That's What Dreams Are Made Of has a killer melodic hook, and the title track in here is a flat out banger. The main riff that should get stuck in your head. If you love classic heavy metal and you haven't heard this, that riff, just make sure there's a new place in your head for it, because it's got a legit earworm, and this got me hooked on it again, because I picked this up forever ago, listened to it a few times, and I kind of set it aside, and I come back to it here more and more, just because I think there's a newfound love for Tank here lately, and holy shit, dude, this album is amazing. Now, in terms of like where they are, it's a little complicated, because there are technically two versions of Tank, because the members split, and somehow they both got the rights to the name Tank, and there's no like Tank BC or Tank AD, at least as far as I saw in Metal Archives. So if you're getting a new Tank album, I'm not sure which camp it's coming from. I think maybe one of them gets to use a certain color versus the other. I don't know. It's confusing as hell, but I know the old stuff is awesome. I still need to get more of it. This debut is just a fucking underrated gem in terms of classic new wave of British heavy metal. So pretty much, if you love Motorhead I think is the main one on here. I strongly recommend checking out Tank. Again, I need to go out there and find some more Tank, because this band is absolutely awesome and underrated as hell. So check them out. All right, that knocks out another one of these. I am once again not sure what I'm gonna do next. This is one I kind of had in the back of my mind, but this was one I was also not sure if I had enough to actually talk about, but it turns out I had plenty. Actually, there's still more on the list, so I don't know, I might be able to do a part 2 to this, but I don't know, I kind of want to keep bouncing around genres, because this is fun, and it kind of, you know, gives me a chance to revisit a lot of stuff that I haven't listened to in a while. Either way, there will be more of these in the future. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there will be a link below in the description, as well as a link to our giveaway for once we hit 7,500 subs, which we are maybe a little bit over 50 away. So if you have not got in on that, all you have to do is click the link below, comment on the video, and you are in, and you can possibly win this stack of 8 CDs that includes the new Cannibal Corpse. Thank you to everyone that has subbed, commented, all that shit. You guys make it all worthwhile. We have so much fun doing this. This has become like quite a fun outlet that really kind of carried over from us being stuck in here from COVID and all that. And while I could gush on forever, I just simply wanted to say thank you once again, and keep staying tuned because there's tons of stuff coming. We also have t-shirts available. If you'd like to get one, hit us up on thrallsmetal@gmail.com. Just write shirts on the subject matter and we will get back to you, and if we have the size that you're looking for, we will hopefully sell you a shirt. So with that, I thank you all for watching, and we will catch you later.